Okay, I got a message, Camtasia recorder, blah blah, but we are still connected with George. George, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So it's gonna be more like a fun video today because we have to get back on track. It was a long holiday and we lost the momentum. Actually, we didn't. George, you always can interrupt me and ask questions if there is something which you want to share with me and say. So what I want to say is that right now I hit the wall. We are not anymore a teacher and a student. We are colleagues right now. So we are gonna discover different things together. Just to get back on track, let me recall what do we have. Actually, what we have is a one application. This is all we have actually, which I have built during the vacation. It's called Quick Start. And the quick start actually answers at least all my questions. I don't know about George, but at least it answers all my questions about how the application should be built. And all I did is actually I read the Identity Server 4 documentation. I wouldn't say that is the most brilliant documentation, but it stands out from the crowd, especially from the .NET documentation and all this kind of stuff. Even though it's much more improved right now, the .NET documentation, still there are a lot of flaws. It's not like PHP documentation when you read and everything is clear. Maybe because .NET Core is a huge platform. With PHP, you build only web applications. This is the type of applications which you usually build. Not saying you cannot build a console or you cannot build a desktop application, but with the PHP, the main focus is on building web applications. With .NET Core, you can build any type of application, and it's meant to build any type of application. PHP doesn't pretend, for example, you can build a desktop application. Memory leaking with PHP doesn't allow you to do that. So right now, this lection or this meeting actually with George will be mostly for just recalling where we are and what we are facing right now as a problem and trying to solve it. And George, you always wanted to get challenges. Here it is. Now we faced one problem, one challenge, which nobody actually came across a solution. So we are the first one. This is the most exciting. I'm very excited about we going forward in this magical forest because right now we are gonna discover something and we can publish a post if we can find a solution. We'll see. We'll see. So now, following the tutorials from Identity Server, I have been able to achieve more than looking the application of Microsoft and reading their book because their book is more theoretical and it explains things but not in very much details. What we are trying to build right now is microservice architecture, which is the last trend in the architecture of the software software applications. I spoke with many developers, and all of them share with me that they even don't use this application. They use it, but they don't put, at least they don't put their services in Docker containers. We made a step further, actually. We are on the bleeding edge of the technologies right now. And we are going to use Kubernetes as well. But that's why we're doing that. It's not only a project. In fact, it's a project for learning things, for using the cutting edge technology. Right now, I even have um, I have to make a quote to one of the clients, and I was thinking to quote this one, but we don't have a solution. So that's why I'm a little bit frustrated because I cannot go forward with that. So what is the problem? So far, so good, George? Do you follow
Yeah,
me?
yeah,
Oh,
follow.
okay, so probably you watched the tutorials. I have one tutorial more, which I did, and I didn't render and publish because I was thinking that I will solve this issue until we meet, and then I will just add the solution to the problem, which I recorded already. But I couldn't find a solution, so we will be looking for the solution together. Okay, so what do we have? We have a project. I already started that. Oh my God, how many things do I have here? Let me close all this. And they keep me busy, of course, the students, I mean, and the university, but this is the exciting project. This is what I'm looking for. Okay, so George, probably you watched the tutorial where what we did actually, the last 2 or 3 tutorials, I made them public. Right now, this tutorial, this meeting actually, this recording, probably is not going to be published because I'm not offering a solution. But the last 2, 3 tutorials, I think, are very important, even though there are not that many people which are interested in them. But for me, those are the most interesting videos. See, it's easy to get the viewers' audience and attention when, for example, you put a course which says how to become a web developer in 5 hours or HTML, CSS. Those are the most popular tutorials. They have millions of views probably because everyone wants to become a developer and he thinks it's easy and the first steps are always easy. It's like going to the dojo. In the dojo, you become a student, you start training, but it's getting harder and harder and harder because you have to compete with much more prepared opponents. And in this case, there are not that many students which continue the path. In the
To be
beginning, they
honest, sorry for interrupting you. To be honest, I think this week is our 1 year now
yeah,
when we start.
yeah, and that's why I say that right now we are equal. I showed you the whole thought process. I don't know, maybe it's 1 year, but already we are up to the most modern type of architecture. It's the microservice into containers. And I insist that we will continue uh, going to this way because it's the most difficult and we will discover many other things. We cannot even find the tutorials which will answer our questions. We will be the guys which will find the solutions and we will publish. But this is the only way, actually. I don't see any other way. If you follow somebody, you're doomed to be second always. But if you find your own way, you're the first one. And many people don't understand this mentality. Actually, you have to learn how to learn. You have to think. This is the most important. So maybe it's 1 year. They say that for 2 years, and many people are skeptical about this claim. But for example, some universities in Bulgaria, software university, I don't want to mention names, they claim that they can create developer for 2 years, and many people laugh on that. They say it's not possible. Now you see why. Because it's an ocean of knowledge. It's mostly a mentality, not that much knowledge, but it's a mentality. You have to read hundreds of books, literally, just to solve one issue. Sometimes, if you want to be first, you have to read a lot. And we will see that right now. So, in order to build whatever we have here, I read the documentation of Identity Server. Not completely. I read as much as necessary to build whatever covers my requirements. And what is my requirement? My requirement is to have a STS, Security Token Service, which will provide me with protection. Actually, it's gonna provide me with authorization for all other my services, for all my services. So we have, how to say that, a guard. This identity server installation is a guard which protects my resources which I want to share with some people. And this is the API. This is actually the useful part of my application. The API which provides me with something. We know already how to build APIs. We know how to build MVC applications. It's a click of a button or one line of code, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the most important right now is just to decouple the authorization and authentication, which are called identity, in a separate even domain. You can have this in a separate domain. Being our own is what excites me because I'm in a full control. For example, you can use the STS of Facebook, you can use Google, you can use Amazon Web Services, you can use whatever you like. But the consent screen and the fact that our clients always will get this consent screen, it's pre-built already. I want to have our own STS server. We went already through opt-out 2.0. We went already through um, OpenID Connect, and all these things are implemented in Identity Server, right? So we will have our own STS, which allows us actually our clients to log in with the social logins from Facebook, from whatever, right?
Yeah.
So we also have a client, which is an MVC client. We have also JavaScript client. This JavaScript and MVC clients, they try to use the resources to exploit the resources of our API, to make a call to the API, get some information, and after that, reply to the client, which stays somewhere here. He is watching his browser, right? And the MVC client doesn't make calls actually to database. No, it's using the APIs. And all these things are into different Docker containers. All these things are different microservices. They have their own databases if necessary. They're absolutely independent and easily swappable. They can be easily replaced. For example, our own STS security token server can easily be replaced with something coming from Google, because they all talk about 2.0 and OpenID Connect. But the most exciting part of this is that we have our own STS, and the more we have, more revenue streams we can discover, and we have a full control, and we have a full understanding. And on top of that, many people may ask you, for example, why do you need your own STS? Because if you want to become a better, you have to know more. Yeah, I know. I always can say, okay, let's go and use Google, for example, for authentication and authorization. Do you have a full control? No. And if the application grows, actually, you may have requirements which you cannot meet with something which comes out of the box from Amazon Web Services, Google, or something. But having your own makes me very happy. I'm a DIY guy. I like to have everything myself. I don't even like to use the cloud services very much, because I know it's a double-edged sword. Why? Very simple. Just a couple of days ago, I bought a server, HP DL360E Generation 8. It's one unit. It's a very, very powerful server. It's 32 threads. Um, and guess how much RAM I can have? I can have over than 400 gigabytes of RAM, which allows me actually to run a lot of virtual machines, a lot of virtualization, and I paid only 430 Bulgarian levs, which is nothing. It's just a joke compared to what I have to pay to Google, Amazon Web Services, and the rest of the cloud providers, and Microsoft, of course. Those are the three leading cloud providers. They take from my account every month, just to have one registry, for example, at least 17 euros. If you count it, it costs me much more just to have one registry on the cloud compared to what I can have at home, and it doesn't consuming that much power. So the people soon will realize that cloud computing is a big trap. It's a trap because it doesn't have a counterpart. All these cloud providers are private companies. They have their private data centers, and they can do whatever they like once they got you. Once they got you to the balls, because you cannot say no if they increase the price or set the rules. You cannot do anything. So we have to build something custom. We have to unite as a community and build something counterpart to this privatization and monopolization of the internet. And there is already movement in this direction. And I know that you like servers and all this kind of stuff. Wouldn't be great actually to have server at home, which is one node of a huge let's say, grid with community cloud opposed to private cloud, and the services will be free, maybe free, or they will cost less, but at least we will control, because right now we don't have a control. If Amazon Web Services decide to do something, as they do, for example, in YouTube, Google, not Amazon Web Services, but Google, of course, I'm talking about Google. Google decides to remove some of the videos. What can you do? Nothing. That's it. They decided that it's too big, or you don't pay enough, or whatever reason. They don't give you explanation. They just put the site down, and that's it. I'm tired of this bullshit. The same with the hosting companies. They decided that uh, from my website, actually there is something which is wrong, and they bring it down, and that's it. I want to have control, especially if you sell your product to somebody else. For example, if you sell your product to a company, you have to have this full control. Or if you serve, for example, a financial institution, of course, it's better to have everything on premises. You have control on your server. What is your thought about that, George? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm thinking that monopolization is too much, and that community cloud looks very good, and I never heard about it, but it's a very good idea. I
Mm.
hope more people listen to that and that raise and become a standard because these guys are making too much money from us.
For nothing. For nothing. It's a micropayments. Actually, I wrote a scientific paper about that, and it's about to be published. I will present this publication on the IEEE conference right now, and I will make it public. And I will work in this direction, because right now we have a single board computers. I bought personally myself. I bought two Raspberry Pis, 4 GB Raspberry Pi 4, and you can easily run Kubernetes on this, and you can share with others. It's almost nothing. It's 5 watts consumption, which is almost nothing, 10 watts. Think about that. A light bulb actually consumes more. So it's like leaving a light bulb running, but you can serve the community. Actually, you can leave the resources, and all we have to find, actually, it's a proper stack of technologies which will allow the people to share files. And there are such technologies like CEPT, for example. This distributed file system, again, started from a scientific community. Um I think it's a dissertation or a thesis of one of the guys who, after that, turned this idea into a business. Now it's a distributed. So the idea is this: around the globe, you have one file which is distributed. So if one node dies, actually the file doesn't die, because there is a replication. There are a lot of such technologies, Hadoop, big data, and other kind of stuff. So the next year probably we will be working in this direction. It's very exciting idea. Actually, community cloud on low power devices. I even order one router which runs OpenID, and this router actually, this is a distribution of Linux, and this router actually offers you cloud, so you can have your own cloud, and it's undestructible, and it's under your control. You don't have to share your data with somebody else, because when you, for example, upload your files to Google Drive, they're unencrypted, they're unprotected, they can read everything, or Microsoft or whatever. So we expose too much information, we give too much power into the hands of a very little people. Zuckerberger and Microsoft, Bill Gates, and all this kind of stuff. They become too much powerful, and I don't like that. I don't like that. It sounds to me like building a great pyramid,
Yeah,
hundreds of thousands of people involved into building something which is, from my standpoint of view, absolutely useless. It's a thump of one idiot. That's it. And I'm always stoned by the human beings which are willing to do that, which are allowing actually this to happen. One idiot built himself a tombstone which involves hundreds of thousands of people working, giving their lives for nothing. Yeah,
50 years.
Yeah, maybe 50 or 20 years, hundreds of thousands of people. What is more idiotic on this planet? I don't see anything else. But if we have a community, something like that, and this architecture actually it's built, it's cloud native. It's cloud native because each one of these services actually can live on a different server, can live on a different domain. So that's why I'm pushing into this idea. And even though we have some problems, we'll solve them. We will solve them somehow. Okay, so let's get back. So I started with identity server, going through the tutorial, but after that I built my own identity server because it didn't actually meet my requirements, and my requirements are, and with the documentation actually I have been able to go only that far to build identity server, but they also ask for money, so they don't lead you to the end of the road. They want you actually to use their consulting services. Of course they deserve it because they have built something, but even if you don't pay for them for leading you to the end, even if you read the entire documentation, you won't find the solutions, all the solutions. If you read the entire documentation, actually you will come up with your own solutions. And this is what I came up with. So this identity server, actually, which comes from the tutorial, doesn't use a database to store the information of the identity server. So what kind of a database, what kind of an identity server is going to be? So you need identity server which communicates with the database. And also, in this identity server, you should be able to allow the people to register. With the tutorial, you don't get there. They just tell you how to actually use ISP identity, which is a different project, you know that. There are two different projects. Identity server is one project, which is led by two guys. Thanks God they exist. And ASP.NET Identity is another project, is a new get package which you can get. So in the last tutorials I have put together the identity server plus ASP.NET, and I put them into the database, which there is no tutorial which shows you how to do that, a part of our tutorial. Do you understand? Do you follow?
Yeah. Yep.
So right now it's ours. We can change it, we can do whatever we like. We can buy, for example, a different template which will change the skin, the presentation layer, and so on and so forth. And this STS is going to protect the API. Right now, this API comes also from the tutorials. It's a standard API, actually. It's a standard way of building an API. You can do it from the console, just going .NET new API, and that's it. You get it, and that's it. But the identity server gives you the insight, what you have to change in the middleware, in the request pipeline. So this API actually, because when you build it with the scaffolding, when you scaffold it with the template, actually the API is unprotected. You remember that probably from the tutorials which
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
You have unprotected.
yeah, it's unprotected. So right now, the identity server tutorials gives you insight, gives you the information how to protect this API, what you have to change inside of this API, so it knows that is it protected with the identity server, with this particular identity server, which resides on such and such IP address and such port, because the different IP addresses and the ports actually look like a different domain. So think of this identity server like put on a different domain. This API knows that this server, identity server, is protecting it, and it's not going to allow any client, because MVC, our MVC client, in fact, is an MVC application which is a client for this API. And this API is not going to allow unauthorized access to it. It's not going to give any information to MVC client if first the MVC client actually doesn't get a token from the identity server. So this is how you go. Do you follow me so far?
Yes, I
Okay,
do.
so now in the last tutorial, I showed that this works perfect. It looks like a charm. Now, the next step is to put everything into Docker containers. This is not discussed even in the identity server documentation. I downloaded everything available. In the identity server documentation, all you have is just one link for a third-party article which doesn't tell you anything, almost anything. Look at this. Now, this is the official documentation. As you can see, it's absolutely new. It's absolutely recent. September 17. Now it's what? September 20, right? Yeah, I think it's 20. So 3 days ago. This is the last documentation. And if you look for a Docker, this is all you get. Look, one of one appearance. Actually, that's it. And when you open it, it's this article, which doesn't tell you anything. If you watch the tutorials, the previous tutorials actually, you saw that everything works like a charm. On 5002, on localhost 5002, you go to the MVC client. If you are not logged in, you get immediately redirected to this application which runs on port 5002 as far as I remember. You have to log in or you have to register. The login and register is done through ASP identity, ASP.NET identity. Yeah, that. It's done through ASP.NET identity. So if you don't have account, I augmented identity server so you can register an identity server knows. After that, you get redirected back to the MVC client, and the callback actually calls right now the API. The API checks the token which is provided by the MVC client and allows it to use the resources, and you get answer in our MVC client. Now, what I did is I put this application into a Docker container. With the right mouse click, you choose add to a Docker compose, and after that add a Docker support. After that, add a Docker compose support. And in the video which I didn't render and which I didn't publish, actually, I put an MVC client into a Docker container as well. And now the trouble started. And I will tell you why. Now, when you work on your own machine, you are in localhost, right?
Yeah.
You're in one network, in the network created by your router. For example, your IP address, my IP address probably is something like, we can check it, of course. You know probably how, but I'm going to show you. So you check the IP address of your computer, you say
ipconfig.
ipconfig, and you can say, for example, all or something like that, and you get your IP address, which in my case is this one.
No, your Wi-Fi.
No, right now I'm in a
Oh,
company.
you're connected Ethernet. Yeah. So that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I have 3 routers right now at home because, as I said, I bought a 1U server which I keep at home, not at data center. Probably I will bring it to the data center, but it's a very interesting configuration, as I said, and I want to test different things. And one of the things is going to be this exact application, which I want to put in Kubernetes, because this is our ultimate goal, to have our application in Kubernetes. So this is the IP address. Kubernetes also comes and brings a lot of complexity, but we will go through this complexity. Nobody else have solved it, so we will solve it. Okay, so this is the IP address of my computer. Now, when different services talk to each other, they always use localhost, which is 127.0.0.1. You know that, localhost.
Yeah.
And the different ports actually for our browser and for HTTP actually look like a different domains. That's fine. So they're in the same network. So far, so good.
Yeah.
But now, when you put identity server into a Docker container, the situation changes. The situation changes because identity server right now, I'm gonna run it just in a second. Identity server now, it's a part of another network. So let's say this is my machine. The square is my machine, and the circle actually represents Docker. Okay, so now my machine, and not only my machine has this IP address which is 192 what was it,
10100.
168.1.100. Okay, so on the net mask, you know that 2.255 2.5 2.550 whatever. So I'm in this network, I have to be the same into the same network, but once I run the Docker, this service now becomes something like a NOT. The Docker container is nothing else but the virtual machine, don't forget that. So it gets its own IP address, which could be 172.168, for example, 112, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we have a trouble because I have to expose this IP address to my machine on a certain port, which is I want to be on 5001. So my browser actually communicates with this IP address, and of course 172.0.0.1, it's in fact the same. This is a loopback. Every machine which wants to address itself actually should use 172.1.0.0.1, which is loopback, or in other words, localhost. Right? So far so good.
Yeah.
You follow me? And I haven't solved this issue, so that's why I'm sharing with you this. So
But so is it the issue here you cannot get out of your machine, or you're looping back to your local host, to your machine, I mean?
now the services cannot communicate. This one cannot communicate with the MVC client, and we'll see why now. Let's start this application and see where the problem is. Okay, so as I said, I recorded one tutorial, but I will render this with only the problem because I couldn't find a solution. Right now we are finding a solution right now. So this is our task for this week. At the end of the week, we will meet again. You'll give me your thoughts, I will give you my thoughts, and we probably will overcome this problem and continue. We have to solve this issue because it's unsolvable. Nobody else has solved this, or at least I am not aware of. If you can find something, if somebody else has solved it, please let me know. But this is our task for this.
Yeah, sure. Also, this year, I'm starting also college this week, and one of the topics for the year is transport networks.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's like a big network, building a big network, building big,
Big
actually
net.
not building, but architecture of a big
Yeah,
networks.
I'm very excited about that.
So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to know about this problem,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm. So, because as you can see, it's not that much programmatical problem.
yeah.
It's more like database and this kind of stuff. Okay, so before we start, I had to do something, but I didn't. So that's I had to show you um, the Docker containers, the Docker images, the Docker volumes, and the Docker networks. Now it's too late. Once you run Visual Studio, it's too late already. Visual Studio, as you can see here, starts doing its job, which is creating the images, running the containers behind the scenes, so you won't even notice that. That's why I don't like using the Microsoft products very much, because they treat us like idiots. Actually, they don't tell you that. They
Yeah, but
tell
we
you.
still can start from the console or the Dockers
Yeah,
or the
I
containers.
can do that. Yeah, I can do that. But right now I started this way because from the console I haven't been able to run it properly. Okay, so as I can see already, I stated this problem. As I said, I did a video about that right now, but I'm introducing now the problem. So look at that. Okay, so let's assume that we happy lived with after our last video, which was running everything together, but not in a Docker container. So I want to mention something. Microservice architecture is not about the Docker containers. You can go away and not run in your microservices into Docker containers. So we happily can live without Docker containers. But the Docker containers allows us actually to be very extremely flexible, um, to have replications, to have high availability, use Kubernetes, and it's, as I like to say, and I repeat myself many times, is a match made in heaven, right? So this is what I want to do. I want to run all these services into a separate Docker containers, right? And in order to orchestrate these services right now, I need the Docker Compose. Docker Compose is for local development, is not for production. For production, instead of Docker Compose, we are going to use Kubernetes or Helm. So Docker Compose is particularly built for development, right?
Yeah.
You understand that? Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so here we go. Now, let me take a look. What do we have in a Docker? First, let me make sure I have a Docker. So as I said, today I'm gonna state the problem, and this week this is gonna be our sprint. Find a solution. Eventually, you, me, and if we cannot find a solution, we will see what path we are gonna take. Maybe we will make a step back. We'll remove the Docker and we'll go another way. I don't know, but we have a goal to build one application. We all already forgot the goal, but it was something about the real estate, whatever. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just illustration. Even if you build a application for your own books or CD library at home, you would follow the same steps, which is
Yeah.
the most important thing, the architecture. And as I said, this is the most modern architecture right now. It's a struggle. It's some people actually don't continue this way. Even the big companies, they just refuse to go this way. But I think this is the future, so that's why
We
we'll
are not
continue.
stepping back. No, no man left behind.
Yeah, no man left behind. Okay, we just turned 180 degrees and go forward again, right?
Yeah.
Like Bulgarians. Okay, so let me look at this now. Change directory. So we will try everything to crack this nut. We will do it. I'm absolutely sure. This is development. This is why the people are giving you big money, because there are such problems which you have to solve, and nobody else on the planet actually has a solution, so you have to invent it. That's why the people are willing to give you money. If it was easy, everybody would do it and it's gonna cost anything. Okay, so trash ls. Many people can argue and say, yeah, as a developer I don't solve this problem. Yeah, you're not probably a developer, you're just a coder. um, to make analogy probably with building companies, uh, as a project manager or architect of the building, you have to think about everything. Right now, we are architecting our application. And yeah, they're executors, for example, the fixers or whatever. These guys, they know only their little sphere, but I want to look at the forest from above. I want to know the architecture. I have to build architecture. Do you follow me? And also
Yeah.
we have to
Big
build the
picture.
procedures, because another step right now is to push all this to a repository, and we will start working together. This is probably another thing, but we have enough things right now to think of. Okay, so trash, and after that was a quick start as far as I remember. If you look at this, Docker Compose, blah blah, and the code is in source as far as I remember. Okay, so that's it. Uh, Docker, Docker PS. Look at this now. Even without asking me, Visual Studio started the containers. And what kind of containers do I have right now?
Mm.
I have first, this is the identity server container.
Yeah.
This is
The
The
MVC
MVC,
client.
this is MVC client is the second one
Yeah.
as I see, and the third one is MS SQL Server. I'm running MS
Yeah.
SQL Server into a container, so we have three containers right now. Let's look at the images. You understand enough this concept. You don't have to know everything about Docker containers to get our job done, right? So look at this. 5 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago. Look, these images have been created behind the scene again from Visual Studio.
Mm-hmm.
Visual Studio hides that for me. 5 minutes ago, the applications have been built. This build process has started. The images have been downloaded. Actually, I didn't remove them, so they stay there. As you can see, I have them from quite a lot of time, 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever. But the proper images have been built after have been downloaded after the build. This build actually have been put it into the images and the containers. The images have been created, and after that, the right now we have three spinning containers. Two of them are based on our own images built by Visual Studio. Let's look at what's going on with the volumes. Volumes, ls. Look at this. We have two volumes. Oh, something. Volume. Volumes plural should show me everything. Okay, but look at this. I have two different volumes because I have two different databases in MS SQL Server. Because even though they say that the containers are volatile, which means that after shutting down the container, all the data inside of the container is gone, you need a persistent layer. So the MS SQL Server, that's why I need these volumes. Those are persistent layers. Those are special containers which don't get removed unless you explicitly remove them after the container is dead. But this is what happens now. The image of MS SQL Server has been downloaded, right?
Mm.
After having the image, an MS SQL Server has been spun as a container. And this container actually needs somewhere place to save the data. And these two volumes actually have been mounted to the container in a certain point in the file system. So whatever comes into this container actually goes through and it's recorded into these volumes. After killing the container, this volume will remain in my file system, as you can see. You'll see it soon. So is that ring the bell?
Yeah.
You understand what's going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we will continue with you. I'm very excited because you also learn from another source, and we will close the circle. We will close the circle. So the goal is, right now we have application working, microservice architecture, but it's not in Docker containers. Now, we started to put everything into Docker containers. Okay, let's look at the network. Those are the four main pillars in a Docker. Docker, network, ls. Look now. Docker, composer. Look at this. This is a special network created by Docker. By Docker
Yeah.
Compose. I didn't have this
So
before.
Docker is making his local network
Exactly.
to connect the containers.
Exactly. Even though it extends this idea even further, it has its own DNS server inside of this network for resolving the host names. This is very important. So it's like having your own network into your Docker virtual machine, because right now I'm running in virtual machine. I have two different ways to run the Docker as a Windows subsystem for Linux 2, which is extremely fast. I tried, it's extremely fast. And another one is running in Hyper-V. Right now I'm running it in a Hyper-V. This is Docker. This is my Linux machine. This is Docker machine, because Docker is only for Linux. We are using Docker containers, which are Linux Docker containers. Okay, so Inside of this machine, actually, Docker has created a network. I can create as many networks as I like. Not a problem at all. With Docker, with a simple command docker create, Docker network create, you give the name and you get a network, a new network. There are options, of course. But let me inspect Docker inspect and put this network. We lost a little bit momentum, but we will gain this momentum back, right? This week you will have some thoughts, you'll have something to chew in your brain, and me too. So look at now. These IP addresses are randomly assigned to the Docker containers. The next time when you run it, nobody guarantees that the IP addresses will be the same, right? You understand that?
Yeah.
Into the network.
Yeah, but we can change that from the settings inside the Docker compose, not Docker compose, the Docker file in the program.
No,
You can choose.
no. When it runs, Docker assigns the IP addresses. Maybe there is a way to fix the IP address internally into the Docker, but
I think that's what we have to look first to make permanent
IP
IP address
addresses.
of that
No,
containers.
I don't think so, and I don't like that. We have to be decoupled from this. So probably in Docker network we have also DHCP server, dynamic host configuration protocol, which assigns the IP addresses because each Docker container in fact is a Linux distribution, usually Linux distribution, right? It's a
Mhm.
it's a machine. It's like your own machine. That's it. It's nothing else, and you should have one IP address assigned to it. And as you can see, it's given a CIDR, which is /16, which means how much we have 6. So it's not a good practice actually to assign the pre-assigned IP addresses. I have done that, that's for sure. I have done it, but it's a little bit against the rules. But whatever.
It's not good practice.
Not a good practice just to fix the IP addresses. Of course, this is one way to skin a cat. I'm not saying we won't be forced to do that. If we have to, we'll do it. I'm just stating the problem right now. I know it's a little bit lengthy video. Maybe we'll finish earlier today because we have to state the problem. I'm just showing you the situation right now, the current situation. Okay, so as you can see, this is what first this is identity server, and as you can see, the address which is given to identity server is 172.2.3.4 of them, blah blah. Okay, there is no consistency. It's just IP address which is assigned, and that's it. Why you don't even need to do that, as you said, and I'll tell you why. Because the name which you give to the service actually plays the role of the host name of the machine. In other words, you don't need to know the IP address. Docker has its own DNS server. So instead of calling the IP address, you can call the machine by its host name. And the Docker makes the resolution and knows the IP address which stays behind this name, right? You understand that?
Yeah, yeah, that's a proper way.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is the proper way to do it. This is the proper way to do it. So an MVC client, look here, we have MVC client, and whatever it's assigned, that's it. DHCP server knows how to assign the IP addresses, and this IP address is linked to this name, and this is what you know. This is the proper way to do it. You know the host name of the machine, so you can always say HTTPS column / MVC client inside of the network. Now, another problem is that actually this is a total different network, and some of the services get exposed to the network which I am. My development computer, it's in another network which is 192.168 blah 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 blah. But still, I have exposed some of the services. Let's look at that. Let's go back to Visual Studio and see how that is done and all this kind of stuff. Right now, open the Docker Compose file. Look at this Docker Compose file. See now in the Docker Compose, why Docker Compose actually is created. I happily can avoid using a Docker Compose, but this is the main reason which I mentioned before, because each one of the services, it's known by its host name. So the services can communicate to each other not using the IP addresses internally into the Docker, but instead they can use their names. You follow me so far, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I made this, it's not a mistake or naive solution or something, but what I do, for example, is I run one Docker container. I run another Docker container with a database. So I run my Docker container. This is what you could do. You run your Docker container with a command docker run. After that, you run your second Docker container, which is the database. And after that, you enter your first Docker container. You make changes in the connection string. So your application right now can connect to the database through the IP address. And you can avoid using the host names, which is stupid because and you don't have to shut down these Docker containers. If you're forced to shut down these Docker containers, you have to go through again the same procedure. It's not stupid procedure, but it's a manual. And we are trying to automate everything, right? You understand the problem.
Yeah.
It's not a
Is it
problem.
not
Yeah.
is it not part of Kubernetes settings, by the way, this one?
No.
Okay.
So
I'm just asking.
no.
I'm not aware. Just asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now we are not even talking about Kubernetes. We haven't get to the point where our application is ready to be deployed in a Kubernetes cluster. For Kubernetes, we have to do something else. For example, if you want to deploy, look at this. Container orchestration support. And when you click
Mm.
here, you choose, because right now we have Docker Compose, that's why it's not offering us Docker Compose, but it's offering us Kubernetes Helms. This is, and it's going to create a different YAML file, which is not Docker Compose, but is for Kubernetes, for deployment on the production. Actually, we can do this, and we can see this here. Look, this API still is not added to Docker Compose, which is for local development. It's orchestration tool for local development, and Kubernetes is our orchestration tool actually for production. Look now. Service Fabric. They even look. They even have added a third one, which I don't even know. Docker Compose, Service Fabric, and Kubernetes Helm. Service Fabric, I bet, is something coming from Microsoft, is or these three client or cloud providers. But I would like to use Kubernetes right now. Okay, so look this. In the Docker Compose, you automate the whole process of running these two services together, right? You understand that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Docker Compose automates and gives names to different services and puts everything in order, orchestrates it. Because look what I say here. I say, okay, first service, it's called first service, blah, 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 blah. This is done by Visual Studio. It's named like that, but I can name it the way I like. And after that, it says, this is the image which you have to use to spin the container. By the way, if the image is not built, then you build it and use as a context the current directory, and a Docker file, it resides in source first blah 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 Docker file. Use this to build the image if eventually the image is not presented. You understand that?
Yeah.
In the Kubernetes, this second is illegal. Kubernetes doesn't pay attention to build your own images. It doesn't care. You have to provide directly with the image. In Kubernetes, this wouldn't work. In the production, there is no place to keep busy your server building something, images. No. For Kubernetes is only orchestration. You follow me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we
Yeah, but who's building the images then? I mean, you give Kubernetes
Docker.
images.
Docker who build the images? We have to build the images.
We pre-build the images
Exactly.
and give it Kubernetes build it already, and he's just running it in on the server.
Exactly. So we
Okay.
have to build the images, as you can see here. Visual Studio already did this for us. Now, through this magical forest, our movement will be slow right now and painful. You understand that? Now we are not in the position of the teacher and the student. We are both thinkers with you. So that's why it's gonna take time. But look at this. These images, even if I close right now my Visual Studio, these images will stay. And if I decide, I can tag these images. Right now, the tag is development, but I can change the name. For example, I can say, okay,
Stable 1.0
stable
or
1.0. I can rename it, but this is not that important. The most important is when I rename it, look what I can add. I can say, okay, and using this registry. They're free registries. For example, I have here GitLab. Look, GitLab, it's free, and it allows you to push your images there. So when I'm renaming this image, actually, I purposely will rename it like registry gitlab.com wingman007, and I can give, for example, here the name of the project, which is gonna be real estate, for example, real estate, and after that you decide in which folder, how to name it, in which folder to put the image, and after that you can give a version, whatever you like. The tag is free for you to use it. Version 00.1, as you can see. Okay, and after that this is available already from any computer on this planet. Of course, I can decide this image to be private. So I give you, for example, the username and password for this registry, and you can download the image. You can spin it. You download it with Docker. You say, for example, Docker pull registry gitlab.com blah 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 blah. It's gonna ask you for username and password for this registry if you haven't logged in yet. It's gonna download the image and you will have it here in your local images. This is exactly what Kubernetes expects you to have, to be done. Do you understand now?
yeah.
Because right now, as you can see, Docker Compose allows you to build the image if the image doesn't exist locally. It says, okay, look at here. If you can find this image, okay, use it. Otherwise, here it is, the instruction for building. For Kubernetes, this is not a concern. If you cannot find the image, that's it. Finito. Okay, so, and after that, look at this. I'm saying I'm gonna have another service, which is DB. As I said in tutorials, in the previous tutorials, probably this is not the most descriptive name. We should change this name, but just to remind that this is a database, but for identity server, because there are many databases, we'll have many databases in our project. But I say, okay, you depend on another service which is called DB. And for DB, I don't even care. Look at this image. You don't see a build section because I'm not building the Microsoft SQL Server. I have only chance to download it. Look, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even need it to be local. It's gonna become local. And after that, I'm setting the password for my SQL Server. And I will know that DB service will be spin from the image which is downloaded from Microsoft, and the password for access my local MS SQL server which is running into container is gonna be pass blah blah node 123. Okay, and after that my client. Look, for my client, I decided not to put dependencies, but I should and I could if I decide. And I said image docker mvc build context blah blah. By the way, this is not done by me by hand. Actually, it's done by Visual Studio. When you add actually a service to orchestrator, in this case Docker Compose, it's automatically added here. Okay, so you may ask, why don't Docker have something like Kubernetes? Yes, they have. It's called Docker Swarm. It's called Docker Swarm, but everybody is using Kubernetes for orchestration, and Docker Compose is especially for development. With Kubernetes, it's going to be very difficult to develop, because Kubernetes is a cluster. You have to run it locally here, and it's a little bit cumbersome, but we may find this way. We can run. I'm running Kubernetes myself here on my own machine. So if something else, if we don't come up with something else, I'll try even with Kubernetes directly in the production. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So Docker Compose is for development, because it actually reflects what's going to happen on the production, but it gives you more freedom, and it's especially for local. You cannot run, actually you can run Docker Compose on your servers, but it's not a good practice, to run with Docker Compose. And I don't have in my servers Docker Compose. Docker Compose is for development purposes only. So right now we have 3 services. It's clear picture, right? You understand everything.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
MVC client. Go. Let's look at this. Now look what I say. Now notice this Docker Compose override is a child YAML file which is going to be merged with the Docker Compose YAML. So you can have many different overrides of the Docker Compose, which augment the core Docker Compose. This Docker Compose is used, but it gets merged with this override. We can have production, we can have something else, whatever we decide. Do you understand?
Yeah, that's like partial
Yeah,
classing.
exactly, like a partial, exactly. So look, what did I say? I said, okay, I wanna expose port 443, which is SSL. This is the port where the SSL happens, as a port 5001 to my local machine. Okay, you remember the problem with the network.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to run on a different IP address. It's running already on a different IP address, but I can access it. Oops, what did I do? I can access on localhost 5001. This is the declaration which you have to make here if you want to expose your your Docker containers outside of this internal Docker network, right?
Yeah.
So 5001 is going to allow me actually to access my identity server. I don't have to expose anything from database because it's internal affair, right? This actually, it's a very secure approach, because nobody can penetrate this Docker network right now. I'm just exposing port 5001 because I need to communicate with this service, but this service communicates with the database internally, and I don't expose port 1433. As far as I remember, this is the port of MS SQL Server. I don't have to allow the world to access my server, right?
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And here what I say: hey, by the way, I want this source directories from inside of Docker container to be mapped, actually uh, mount to be mount to these volumes. So var opt ms SQL server, this is one directory where the MS SQL server saves its data internally into the Docker container. But now I'm gonna map it to external volume. So if the container dies, the volume will persist the data, and this is the main reason the SQL server exists, right?
Yeah.
So SQL servers are for persistence, right? And here we have the same thing, volume, and I say, okay, another folder inside of the Docker container, I want to be mount to this container, to this volume, sorry about that. And now MS client, this MVC client, look, I map it again to 5002, naive. I was thinking that everything is gonna work, right? Before,
Mhm.
my identity server was on localhost 5001, right?
Yeah.
My MVC client was running on localhost 5002 before I put them into the containers, right? So I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking that, okay, so if I expose the same ports, everything should be fine, right? Everything should work. But let's run this application and see what happens now. Look, when you add a Docker Compose, now when you run the application, actually it's gonna run the Docker Compose file instead of Internet Information Services Express and all this kind of stuff. So you run it by hitting this Docker Compose, and we have to wait a while because now it's doing a lot of things. We have to be a little bit patient. So I'm gonna state the problem and probably will stop right now. And this is the task, even though it's not in a ticket, but this is the task which we have to complete. I will give you all the links as well in this video. While actually it's thinking, because it's gonna take a lot of time, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you everything what I have been able to find. So I'll give you the errors as well, socket exception. Okay, maybe the appropriate time is to show you how I came across all these articles when I saw the errors. So you follow me so far, and you saw
Yeah.
what's going on, right?
Yes.
It's not a wonder, it's not something special. Look, I have a lot of Docker containers, and right now it's showing me that these two are running, spinning. This is the third one because these two actually are part of my application, and this third one is not a part of the application, it's just a supporting. Probably that's why Microsoft decided to put it this under this line, right? Otherwise
Mm-hmm.
I would put it there, but that's uh, look, now that's not such a big problem. Okay, so 5001. Okay, it's running, right? So
Mm-hmm.
identity server is running, ready to do whatever it's necessary. But we have a very complicated communication. Now, on port 5001, I have my identity server, which is running right now into a container, which communicates with another, with the database, so I can register if I like. Everything is fine. Look, well-known OpenID configuration. We have to look at here, HTTP localhost 5001. Maybe we should change the configuration. We'll see that. Okay, so identity server works, right? Now let's
Yes.
think, what else do we have running? Right now we have on port 2002, as I showed you already. On 5002 we have the MVC client.
Yes.
The MVC client now has to redirect. When we try to access it, immediately has to redirect to localhost 5001. And 5001, this is the OAuth2. We talked about that already. Probably you recall some of the things, but you know that it's a complicated story right now. Think about this localhost 5001 like one URL. Now we go to 5002, for example, and in the middleware we set to this MVC client, okay, if somebody needs to log into you, you first have to go to identity server, to some kind of identity server, right?
5001 and then redirect back to 5002.
Exactly. And I naively had the feeling that everything is gonna work. I was very happy, but look at this now. Now I'm going to 5002. 5002 should redirect me, but
Yeah.
no, it's not happening. But notice this. Notice what's happening.
It's inside.
It's inside. Something is going on inside. Do you know?
Wow.
They try to communicate somehow, and something happens. And I don't know what's happening right now. Uh, and I actually know what's happening. So now we have to play with the middleware a little bit. Obviously, it's not gonna work. So these two services put in the containers are giving me troubles. They
Yeah,
used
they're
to
not gonna
work
communicate.
without containers. But now what's going on is this. See what this guy says. Okay. Oh my god. Come on. Look. Now the guy ran into the same problem and look at what he says. Docker containers and localhost cannot assign request address. I will show you this error. This is how I came across this error. Because we don't see this error right now because I changed the middleware in the previous tutorial. So I would ask you to watch the previous tutorial, which I'm gonna render today and put it. This is the tutorial again with the problem, but
Yeah.
I discovered this problem before today's meeting and I recorded it for you. So you will see the steps I took actually in order to get to this point, which you just saw. Actually, let's rewind, and I'm gonna show you what was it and how I came across this problem. Okay, I'm gonna stop it, and I'll bring it back to the situation which I was before. MVC client. Look at this now. Startup. Okay. Metadata false. So immediately after getting everything working without the Docker containers, we had something like that. Now on the MVC client, we have to tell the MVC client who is the authorization service. What is the authorization service? We have to provide it with IP address, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's logical. When, for example, MVC client is protected by a third-party STS, in this case it's our own, we have to tell the MVC server, or the MVC client, listen client, you yourself, you are protected by such and such STS server, which in my case is HTTPS 5001, right?
Yes, it
You
is.
follow so far. Everything
Yeah.
fair. Okay, I'm gonna comment this. Now, you also have to tell the STS what is the callback, because the STS will present the user with the consent, a login screen, and consent, right?
Yeah.
You remember from OAuth2, that's why I wanted you to know that, from Nate Barbettini, right?
Yeah.
So far, so good, logical. We have to tell the MVC client, okay, you're protected by such and such STS, which is on this URL, right?
Yeah.
The next
When is internally, why use HTTPS? Can you use HTTP on?
could be, but could be only for development purposes. Right now, you know, Google is gonna refuse to go to a website soon, probably if it's not HTTPS. So it's gotta be SOC security layer. The communication
Yeah,
always
but
have
they're
to be encrypted.
communicating to each other,
Pardon
no?
me?
That's only between each other.
Yeah, in this case,
Communication.
yeah, this is one possible solution, and I did it. I will show you, right? Just in a second. I'm gonna show you that. Just in a second. Okay, so coming directly from the world where there were no Docker containers, the situation was like that. Options, authority, HTTP, and everything was working perfectly. And I didn't have this one. This is exactly your proposition. This what you propose. This is exactly what I did. But imagine we are coming directly from the world where there are no Docker containers, and I know that I'm exposing identity server on port 5001. So I'm telling my client, which is exposed on 5002, I'm telling my client, okay, listen, you're protected by 5001, and if you want to access a third-party API or something, ask for talking the very same server. This is what I'm saying here. OpenID connect options, and I'm saying right now, you need to be protected, and this is the guy who is protecting you. This is your STS server, right?
Yes.
This is the OID part from the communication with STS server. Down below, I'm telling also, listen, I'm the client MVC. Here it is my secret. I want you to give me the response code So you have to give me JWT or JOT, right?
Yeah.
You have to give me JOT. So I know that this client is allowed to use my services as an MVC client, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has to log in, but this login is going to be confirmed by third party, in this case STS. I'm going to redirect you to this server. So myself as a client, I'm protected from this STS. But also, I'm asking this STS to give me the token, access token this time. This is a different type of token. You remember from O2, you have to get two tokens. One of them is JOT, JWT, which allows the client, which stays before the browser, front of the browser, to communicate with me so I can serve him. But at the same time, as a client, as an application, I would like to use access to API 1, which is also protected by the same authority, by the same STS, right?
Yeah.
Follow me.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so two things. First, I am protected myself as a client from this STS, and second, this STS is protecting a service which I will need. So I say okay, and I want to give you give me also a scope for a P1, and I'm giving you my credentials. I'm MVC client, you know me, because in the identity server I'm registered. This is my password, this is my secret, and I want to communicate with you with code. This is the most complicated, you remember.
Yes.
Code, blah, 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 blah. And after that, I will have access. First, I will recognize right now the user. I will know who he is. And second, I'm getting access to one API eventually to use it, right? So this
With
is,
token, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so we will concentrate this in this very steep curve. Okay, so now options, authority, HTTP, blah, blah, 5001. Okay, let's save it. And let's run it again. Docker compose. You follow me so far. On 5001 I have the STS. On 5002 I have my client, right?
Yeah.
And they
Yeah, yeah. It's a client.
pardon me, an MVC client, yeah. And in Docker compose overwrite, this is what I said. Okay, I want you to expose identity server on 5001. I want you to expose my client outside of the Docker network on 5002. And my machine
Mm-hmm.
is localhost, right? So
Yes.
both of these services I can access on localhost 5001 and 5002. But there is something wrong with the disk freaking communication and it doesn't happen. You follow me? Do you think this is a sanity check? Actually, I'm checking my sanity. Am I crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, but way of thinking it's logical, right?
It is, yeah.
It's logical, but it doesn't work. We have to figure out why. So I hit Docker Compose again, and we will see. You will see the problem now. I'll repeat again my attempt to solve the problem, and you'll understand where we are right now. As I said, I don't expect you to know all this because I recorded the problem in another video. I will render this video and expose the problem, and right now state it again in this video. Okay, so look what's going on. Okay, so look 5001 immediately. And something is my browser just remembers a URL which is freaking something. I don't know what it is. So okay, so now 5001 still works. Let's go to 5002, which is our client. Our client is told to go to 5001 and ask the user to log in there, and after that I gave my client actually it knows what's gonna be the return URL. Identity server should redirect me back, but we don't even get there. So look at now. I'm going to my client. My client is trying to go to 5001, and look at the messages now. An unhandled exception occurred while processing the request. Socket exception. Cannot assign requested address. And this is how I came up with these articles. So I copy the URL, I put it here. See?
Yeah.
And I get
Yes.
with this one. Docker containers or localhost cannot assign requested address. Look
Yes.
out for your, and let's try to figure out what's going on. So the guy doesn't have so complicated case as we do, because now we have to have a lot of complications. We have to have a lot of communication. I'm not even sure that we can use our identity server into a container. Maybe we should take it out from the containers and use only the services as a containers, but we have to figure out that. See, he has this case. He has a website like our client, MVC client, right? Which is running on port 5222, which is not even into a container, which is running locally.
Yeah, I see.
And he has an API, which is running into a Docker container, and it's exposed on port 5555, right?
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't have in his equation even the identity server. He has simply two applications running. One of them is in a Docker container, another one is running outside of the Docker container, but he expects this to happen, communication to happen. And look at the situation when they are not into Docker containers. Localhost 40222, which communicates with the API, and everything is happy, rosy, as we did before Docker containers. But when you put it into the Docker container, this is the situation now. So our API, in our case, our identity server, and not only identity server, but our MVC client tries to redirect the user to localhost 5001. But inside of the Docker container, localhost 5001, it's pointing back to the very same Docker container, which has the port 5002, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Get the idea.
Yeah, makes sense, yes.
So in fact,
Because it's virtual machine and it's
yeah,
pointing back to it.
we have our identity server in another IP address. It's not on the localhost, but doesn't matter. It's inside of Docker container or outside of Docker container. When you say localhost, that means loopback. Point
Mm-hmm.
yourself back. And our MVC client, actually, what it does, it says, okay, user, I will redirect you to localhost 5001, which means for the DNS resolution, actually go back to the same IP address where the MVC client is and try to access port 5001. But there is nothing running on 5001. 5001, actually, our identity server is running on another IP address.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't even know the IP address, or is it not good practice actually to point the IP address? So what we could do, you already guessed it. You said we have to look at the IP address inside of the Docker, eventually assign, and it's gotta work. Probably it's gotta work. Look, Docker network.
Can we play with the gateways? Because I remember first year in the college when we were doing networks, the teacher said the way node to communicate outside the router is with the gateways.
Tell me how, and I will do it. Right now,
Because he said, yeah,
all I know is the IP addresses of these two machines, which are not guaranteed. As I said, they are not guaranteed. The next time I run it again, they will change the IP addresses. They can swap it, but still change it. You understand that? Docker
yeah.
assigns with the DHCP server, assigns different IP addresses. So we can play smart and say that network while they're running, which is not a very good idea. While they're running network ls, because I don't remember the networks. And now I'm gonna say Docker inspect. So any ideas are welcome. So inspect Docker. Now what I can do is I can bet because I'm not sure. I can bet that my my server, the next time when I run it, is gonna be on this port, right? And it's gonna be on this IP address. It's not.
No, I think they're random every time.
They run them every time. So what I can do is I can say, for example, and this is gonna play only for the internal network. So I can go here. I have to stop it. You understand what's the problem? Now
Yeah, but I think
now
we have even bigger problem than this because even though if we solve this problem with local host, then we have to play on bigger stage with the Kubernetes when we are in production.
exactly. When you're in production, nobody guarantees. So I can eventually say that, right? And may work, and eventually may work. Okay, why don't we try that? So this is how we are gonna crack this nut. We will try everything possible, everything what we can think of. I'm gonna stop the application. Now, when I stop it, when I run it the next time, nobody guarantees that the IP is gonna be the same. But even if I'm lucky
Can we
enough,
use the name instead?
yeah, exactly. This is the next idea. So I came across the idea. Okay, why don't I use the host name? Okay, why don't we use the host name? Let's use the host name. Agree?
You already have it in comments, so
Exactly. I already have it in the com. But let's go this path. Let's go this route and see what the problem is. So now coming directly from the non-Docker world is not gonna work. Okay. So now what's the name? Let's go with the name. Let's go with the name. And again with HTTPS, right? Because we want to use security socket layer. Nobody in the modern world communicates with a server if it's not SSL. But let's say, okay, this is internal. We can go away with that. We can make a compromise with that, right? So let's try
yeah.
this. Let's try and see what happens now. Because obviously, if I put the IP address the next time, the IP address could be different and I will get the very same error. In fact, is not discoverable. I cannot find it. Localhost 5001 doesn't exist in the context of Docker. Okay, so let's try right now and see if we play smart, what's going to happen now. Let's put the name of the service. So the internal DNS server of the Docker is going to resolve this name. It's going to know the IP address, whatever it is. We don't know, but it doesn't matter, right? So let's try
Yeah.
and see what happens. Those are the problems which the developers solve. That's it. This is to be a developer, not to code like idiot, not to come up with bullshit and whatever. This is something real. So this week, this is the task. By the end of the week, I would like you to come up with solutions if you have any. You can very easily represent this situation, or I can give you, nor I will give you, of course, the application.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the first challenge actually is going to be to run the application on your own machine because,
Yeah, I think I can figure this out. Yeah.
yeah. So now, and the proper way to do it is through source control management, but it's not necessary right now. We'll see how we are going to do that. Okay, so let's go back and see what happens. So now, instead of localhost 5001, I'm putting what? First, blah, 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 blah. Look at this. I'm not even putting 5001. Why? Simply because when you use HTTPS, by default is used 443.
Mm-hmm.
5001 is a port which is used outside of the Docker network. But when you're inside of the Docker network, the HTTPS happens on port 443. Ooh, let me turn my battery on. Okay, my power on. Okay, a lot of things are happening right now. Hopefully, it's gonna open the. But you see the problem, right?
Yes, I see the problem.
So now 5001. Let's see what happens. Okay, so far so good. But
Yeah.
let's try with 5002, which is gonna redirect, blah, 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 blah. Okay, an unhandled exception, but notice this time the exception is different. Authentication exception. The remote certificate is invalid according to the validation procedure. Look, which means that these two servers, these two services actually wants to communicate. They want to communicate with the HTTPS, right?
Yes.
And what happens right now is I have a certificate, but this certificate is for localhost. It's not for 172 blah 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 or for the first blah 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 blah. You understand that?
Yeah.
So right now
Actually,
they
the
can communicate.
identity server
Pardon me?
declined access because of your MVC client,
Exactly.
or
Exactly.
yeah, it
Actually, it's
don't
vice
have
versa.
valid
Actually, it's
certificate.
vice versa. I think that the certificate of the I'm not quite sure in that, but look, now I think that the client right now doesn't accept the certificate of identity server, but it doesn't really matter because they refuse to communicate. So at least we solved part of the problem.
Yeah, if you remove the S, is that gonna work or?
Look, this is the next thing. Look at this. This is the next thing.
Yeah,
Now the client refuses to communicate at all. It says
because
it's not
it's not
secure.
secure.
Yeah, this is how it's built Microsoft. You understand?
Yes.
So they say, no, 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 no. I'm not gonna communicate with somebody if it's not secure. That's it. It refuses. So we are facing a problem. So how can we resolve this problem? So I found that if I force it, I can say options require HTTPS metadata false. So I'm forcing it. I'm saying, okay, listen, I understand the risk. I know I shouldn't be communicating without security socket, but despite this
But try,
fact,
please.
please try. I'm desperate right now to find a solution. Please try. I'm ready to sacrifice the security just to make it work somehow. So let's try and see what's happening right now. And there is another problem as well. You now understand that we haven't overcome the first problem, which is our client refuses to communicate with the identity server. But once we
Yeah.
solve this problem, now we have a second problem because our identity server is gonna redirect us back to the client to the not the feedback but callback to the callback URL. So they both need to know each other, and I haven't been able to find any solution about that. This problem is even simpler than ours. It's simply one application which doesn't want to communicate with another application, and that's it. I look at many other solutions. The closest which I have been able to find is this one, and I'm gonna send you this. This is the closest, even though it doesn't cover our requirements, but still it's the closest one. So at least it talks about identity server communicating with um, Angular client. Our client is even more complicated. It's not a simply a simple single page application. Our client is MVC client, and this is what we have to solve. And if we solve it, it deserves actually an article to be written about that. Okay, so now I'm saying, okay, please communicate non-securely. Please, at least communicate. Exchange something with the server. Let's see if that works. Let me stop it and run it again. Now, and this is where we at right now. Non-secure, we sacrifice everything, security, whatever, just in the name of being able to communicate somehow into the Docker network. So try to figure out what the problem is. I also will try, I will read a lot, and we have to solve this issue.
What about this method, authority?
I have
Uh,
no idea. You have to read it. See,
I will read it,
yeah,
yeah.
we have to read.
Because it might have any, you know, inside some methods that allow us to do something.
Mm. At least something, do you know? At least something. They refuse to communicate with each other, even internally. But I cannot even imagine how we are gonna develop this because I want all the services to be into the Docker containers. How on the developer's machine this is possible? So 5002. But look at this. It tried to connect to it,
Yeah.
but it's trying to connect it outside of the Docker network. This is what I cannot imagine. Right now, what I have to do probably is run another Docker container with what? How are you gonna solve this? And on top of that, I tried an example application which is related to the book containerized blah 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 applications. We went through already this. Remember the example we started with?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
microservices book on
and guess
Microsoft.
what? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Everything is into containers. Maybe we should be looking this. I had a hope that if I dig deep into this application, I'll figure out how they did it, how Microsoft did it, so it works. But in fact, their application is not working. When you're in the MVC client, which shows the clothes, the merchants, the
Yeah.
products, and when you try to log in, you have the same application on your machine. Try to do it and see what happens. It doesn't work. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
there is a solution, and I will try to figure out the solution. But look, right now it's trying to go there, and of course cannot because my computer right now it's in the context of my local machine. And in the context of my local machine, it doesn't know where to go. Do you know what? I come up with an idea. Maybe I should put in my host this one and let's see what happens. I'm talking about, look, you know that you have first file hosts, which when you try to resolve a given domain name, first this
Mm-hmm.
file actually it's looked into. Okay, so let me try that. Windows drive, where was that? Christ. Um, system System 32 drivers. Etsy. Here we go. This is the file for the resolutions. Yeah, we usually, when we pirate software, we have to change something here, you know, probably.
Yeah.
So I have to run Notepad as an administrator, otherwise it's not gonna happen. Run it as administrator. I'm not sure what I'm doing right now. So now I'm gonna open it. Uh, Windows System 32 drivers, Etsy. Um, Show me all documents. So hosts. Look at this. Uh, uh, I have done something here after using another virtual switch in Hyper-V. Blah 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 blah. So I'm wondering if I add this domain here and say localhost, but no, it doesn't look to me. This is what I wanted to do. I can say, for example, 227.0.0.0.1, and I say, okay, if I tell you first blah 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 blah, go there, go to 5001. What about that?
No, I don't know, to be honest.
Me neither. So let's try that.
I don't know what's gonna be outcome.
So let's try that. So this is our task right now, solving this issue. Um, there is not too much meat into this lection because I'm not giving solution, but right now I'm rather giving problems. But this is how
Well,
it is. So Docker compose and let's see what happens now. Okay, so what I did is I set to my DNS server a resolution, DNS resolution. Because this is what happens actually internally in your operating system. When you go to a certain domain, the first thing is done, they look into this file, hosts. And after that, it turns to the DHCP, to the DNS server of your of your provider, internet service provider. But the first thing is looking there. So what did I say? 5001 or 5002? Did I close
5001.
5001?
Mm-hmm.
What is this? Why don't I see it? Ah, okay. So let's try and see what happens now. No. Uh, okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna zip and give you the entire project, which is a stupid way to do it, but right now this is what I can think of. This is the easiest way of on UK English. So
Why we're not, why we don't have like
a repository.
that identity server, the project to master branch, and then we can do one branch for me, or something like that.
Yeah. Um,
But
right now I'm getting tired, so let's zip it. Let's send it, and you will have the complete copy. You can do whatever you like, right?
yeah,
So without even thinking about branches and anything, because this is not our concern right now. We have a bigger concern to solve. Uh,
yeah,
and we'll see what happens because I don't know the answer of this question. And we can find it. We gotta find the answer to this question.
I will download today all my lectures for this year for networking,
Yeah,
and I'll read them. I'll read them all.
yeah, read them all and come up with a solution. I will do the same. See, right now, in order to solve this little issue, little in quotation marks, actually, I have to read identity server, probably 200 pages. I have to read identity server here. I have to go through all these articles and check if there is a clue, if there is something which will help us. I'm gonna share under the video all these articles which I have been able to find. All these links will be under this video which we are recording right now. And as I said, it's not a video with solutions, which is rare, but it happens because I haven't been able to find a solution to this problem. How to put the identity server into a Docker container and at the same time happily communicate with the clients and protect the clients, rather protect the clients. Actually, this is the closest which I have been able to find, and probably I will add another project into this solution which I have anyway, which I'm gonna give you right now, uh, with attempt to do something. It's like I mean, this solution is something which I think can become the base of our application because we have everything. We have clients, we have resources which we expose, we have identity server as well, which protects these resources and at the same time provide the clients with the authentication and authorization, right? All
Yeah,
the components are there. We don't have to follow exactly the Microsoft tutorial, which is very complicated and there are Blazor pages, there are not pages but projects, as far as I remember, Xamarin. We will add this later if we have to. We will follow them later. But right now, just by reading the identity server documentation, we came up with something. We have something in our hands. We are not empty-handed right now. And even though we have a client, we always can avoid using the Docker right now. We can deploy the application without Docker containers. So we have something in our hands. But
Mm-hmm.
we will try to solve this issue with the Docker container. Okay, so uh, okay, so I will stop right now recording. It doesn't make sense to record anymore.
Okay.
But at least we practice our English as well, which is a good thing. And
Yeah.
I stated the problem, and we will see how can we solve this issue. If we cannot solve it, then we have to pick one of the low-hanging fruits. For example, put the entire application, concentrate to putting the application um, into the DevOps pipeline somehow. Putting the application into repository, and after that we'll see what comes from that. We'll see. Maybe the solution is using the cloud providers, which I don't like at all. I'm absolutely sure that the application without Docker containers, it's ready to be deployed to Azure, for example, with different services. But even though I'm absolutely sure, I don't know how to do it right now. At this point, we have to do it, and after that, claim that we can do it, right?
Yeah.
So I will stop recording now. We'll stay together a little bit more.